Geniuses leading by 2-1 against China's CDEC in the grand final of the International 2015.
But EG are turning tail and running for now. Universe is ready to turn. He's got Echo slam up. He just sees his bleed. They're going to come back and call out the aggressive. The call down. The perfect position. Then Echo slam. Aggressive. Locked in position right now. He got embraced up by the way the Wyvern, but feet moving forward as well. The DK about to drop. Aggressive on Soul Survivor. CDEC. It looks troublesome. It looks really, really bad for them. Aggressive on the run. Universe right behind him. They keep running out for GG. Well played. EG are your TI5 champions. Here in Key Arena, they've managed to do it. Third place in 2014. It looked rough dropping down the lower bracket. They had to play the best of three.
Ladies and gentlemen, the champions of the International Evil Geniuses.
As you just saw, Evil Geniuses did in fact win the International in 2015 for Dota 2. And even more recently, last year in 2018, the EG Call of Duty World War II team won the 2018 Call of Duty Championship. In addition to Dota 2 and Call of Duty, EG also competes in other games such as PUBG, Super Smash Bros., Rainbow Six Siege, Rocket League, and they have even announced a Fortnite team. They are one of the oldest professional esports team in gaming history, having been founded in 1999. And so how has Evil Geniuses been successful for that period of time? What do they do in terms of life as an esports player and even as an esports coach? What does their training regimen look like? Well, today we got a chance to talk with Aaron Gotcha Chung, who is the head coach of Evil Geniuses and was himself a former professional esports player. So with that, let's take it over to Aaron Chung right now.
Game makers.
I thought we'd first start by talking about the origin story. How did EG start, and when did you get involved with EG?
Yeah, so EG's been around for a long time. I think they've been around for about 20 years, so going back to like 1999. They were one of the first big esports orgs of all time, and they had been involved in games like Quake, CSGO, obviously Rainbow Six Siege for myself, Dota 2, Rocket League, even League of Legends at one point. So they've just been around for a really long time. They're one of the more established orgs in the scene even currently. I got involved with EG several months back, October in 2018. Okay. I had just been playing Siege casually and a bit competitively as well, in more like the amateur leagues, and then I was invited to become a coach for Evil Geniuses.
Right, and I know you mentioned some of the games that EG is involved in. I know like you guys are also going to be moving into Fortnite. Can you talk about what the current sort of games that you guys are competing in today?
Yeah, so some of the main games that we're competing in today, Dota is definitely on the forefront of that list. Right. They're just one of our biggest teams and have always been one of our biggest. We also have a Rocket League team. We have a Rainbow Six Siege team. We also, last year, our COD won the COD World Championship as well. Right. We have a new roster now in COD, so we have quite a few things going for ourselves.
Right, and I know EG is one of the oldest, sort of professional American teams, and
right.
Consider premier organization, but. In terms of like the biggest successes for EG, would you say it was like the international and what are some of the other things that you're sort of proud of from an EG perspective?
Yeah, I mean, winning the COD World Championship was a huge thing. Probably one of the biggest things of all time for us was winning TI5.
Okay.
I think they won about like $6.5 million, $7 million just for themselves, which is huge. Yeah, that was the biggest esports prize in all of history at the time. So really big deal. The international prize pools have just been going up and up and up. Last year it was like 20 million, and we hit we got third in that tournament.
Right.
definitely Dota has accomplished a lot. Even our Siege team has accomplished quite a bit. We were second in quite a few big tournaments. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I thought maybe it'd be great for you to talk to us about, the lifestyle of someone in esports. And so probably from two aspects. First, could you talk to us about, what does a typical day or work week look like for an esports player?
Yeah.
And then you as a head coach, what is your sort of typical day-to-day, what does that look like as well?
Sure. So a typical day in like an esports player's life would probably look like kind of like a reverse baker schedule almost. Like
Okay.
bakers would get up nice and early and get their entire day started.
Yeah.
Probably the opposite for a professional player. They probably get up at around 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. They eat and have breakfast just like anybody else, and then they play a lot of games. Quite frankly, so they would play in public games, ranked games, pub matches, and essentially wait until practice time.
Yeah.
And at that point, we get together and we do things like dry run. We do things like those are essentially drills that we do in our game. After that, we scrimmage against other teams for about 4 or 5 hours, and then some pros they continue to stream afterwards on like Twitch and engage with fans and viewers and that sort of stuff. So in short summary, they play a lot of games and get to do it by getting paid for it. Yeah.
And then for you as the head coach,
Right.
what is your sort of day-to-day or lifestyle look like?
Sure. So a lot of my responsibility as a coach is also being an analyst.
Okay.
So we'll take a lot of time looking at the video footage of other teams and looking at what they're doing and how they're setting up. Siege in particular is a very tactical first-person shooter,
Right.
so it comes down to a lot of strategy. So we analyze our opponents' VODs. We also come up with new strategies ourselves and have to practice them on executing them and making sure that everyone knows what they're doing. And then while we're actually scrimmaging other teams, we have everyone record their point of view so that we can go back and see everyone's perspective and say, oh, okay, on this round you could have done this better, or we could do this together as a team instead of doing that.
Right.
So a lot of it is just helping the team improve overall and then getting more data on our opponents.
Okay.
So that's one of my job as a coach.
And could we drill down into
Sure.
a little bit more of that in terms of like the training techniques? And so you mentioned
Right.
a lot of your players are playing, are scrimmaging.
Right.
As a coach, you were talking about more of the analysis, but are there other sort of training techniques, or I don't know if they're like secret techniques that you have, but like what are some of the things besides just playing that you can do to get better as an esports player?
I mean, I think making sure that you have efficient rest and you have a decent diet,
Right.
And you're drinking plenty of water. I think in any sports, right, those things are important. It's kind of the same thing in esports as well.
Yeah.
Like if you're just not getting enough adequate rest and water and nutrition, like you're just not going to play well. Because it's as a more tactical first-person shooter, you have to be able to think about what your opponents are doing, what's happening, and things like that. And if you're just not thinking well, then you're not doing well.
Right.
So part of succeeding as a player is that. Also, a lot of what we do for first-person shooters is work on our aim and work on our team play.
Yeah.
So there are in-game aim training that you do as well, and then just getting together with your team and trying to figure out what you can do better every day.
Got it.
So. Yeah.
And in terms of like the profile of the most competitive esports player,
Right.
I'm wondering, so for me, I'm an old guy.
Sure.
When I try to play some of these games, I just get destroyed.
Right.
So just wondering, like, is there a certain age range that you think you have to be so that your twitch and your
Right.
reaction time is fast enough? Like from your perspective, what is like the profile of the ideal player, and do you think like when do you start dropping off, like age-wise or whatever, so that you're not as you're not as fast as you need to be?
Sure. I mean, a lot of people obviously start gaming really, really early on, like when they're 5, 6 years old, even younger nowadays. Like everyone has their iPhone games and their console games. So I don't think that there is necessarily an age restriction, though. I mean, what's unique about games is that you don't have to be physically in the best shape possible for your character or for whoever you're playing to be in the best shape possible, right? So a lot of it just comes down to muscle memory and training your eyes and your hand-eye coordination and your aim and that sort of thing. So,
And what are you seeing now in terms of like the most competitive players?
Right.
Like what's the typical age range that you're seeing?
yeah, so in most professional play, not just in Siege, but across like most games, you have to be about 17 years old to
Okay.
compete in any tournament.
Okay. So that's just a legal restriction?
Yeah, just like a legal
Okay.
restriction, because they don't want people, dropping out of high school to,
Sure.
to do that. Yeah. So around 17 is when people start playing, and typically the age range is going to be between 17 and maybe like 23, 24, or somewhere in that range.
Right,
That's going to be your typical, esports player.
Got it. And then just in terms of like the time commitment for
Right.
for some of the audience out there who want to kind of train and get better,
Right.
what do you think is like the minimum amount of time you need to kind of invest and spend to be competitive at that level, at the professional level?
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the game, because as a game matures, how difficult it is to get into that scene or break into the scene becomes that much higher. So if you look at like CS:GO, that's been around forever, right?
Yeah.
It's almost impossible unless like you've been there for a very, very long time to get into the scene at all.
Yeah.
Whereas like in a younger game like Siege, like you can still very much get in, but you do have to put in a lot of time and effort, and you have to have a really, really good understanding of the game. You have to train hard with your team and things of that nature. So, I mean, if you just look at what we do as a team, we'd say we put in, 35 to 40 hours a day just dedicated to, not a day, a week, dedicated to just playing the game, scrimmaging as a team, practicing with the team, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. And then, as a head coach, I'm not sure if you're also responsible for like recruitment, but,
Right.
but how do teams generally kind of find up and coming new players, and what do you guys generally do to try and find those guys and have them join your team?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, one thing that's been unique about our team and has given us a bit of an edge is our team has had its core roster around for quite a long time,
Yeah.
and we haven't changed out that many people.
Okay.
Only a couple people here and there. And so our core of 3-4 people have been around and together for about 3 years, which is kind of unique to our team,
Okay.
and has given us a lot of success. So I work more so on player development and team development. We take roster changes more so as a team rather than like an individual just saying, hey, we could do this and bring this person in or anything like that. In terms of, scouting those opportunities, there's lots of leagues that people compete in. So you have the professional league. So obviously people look to other professional teams and say, who could we potentially get from another team?
Right.
There's also amateur leagues like Challenger League, which is one league below Pro League, where a lot of up-and-coming players are trying to get into Pro League.
Yeah.
And so we look at that pool as well, and we say, who can potentially be molded into a professional player and go from there. So, yeah.
And then from your perspective, what do you think are the most important qualities or characteristics of an esports player to make them as successful as possible? So like, what do you look for? What have you seen enable these players to become, the best?
Right. So, like in all sports, some basic qualities I think are a must. So, number one, competitiveness, just wanting to win and wanting to be the best.
Yeah.
I noticed that in all the best players at all times. Secondly, a willingness to receive criticism and to work on things that they can improve on.
Right.
There's lots of players out there that have egos and don't want to be put into check. They just want to do their own thing and want to just play by themselves, more so than playing together as a team and improving as a team.
Yeah.
So I noticed that the players that lose the ego and say, hey, there are ways that I can improve and ways that I can get better, and I'm looking to get better every day, those players are the ones that really stand out and continue to thrive in a professional setting.
Right.
So, yeah.
One area of interest of mine is just, we've seen the dramatic success of Fortnite, and then Apex Legends kind of burst onto the scene as well. It's kind of dropped a bit from there, but
Sure.
I'm just wondering, from your perspective as like a coach and as an esports player,
Right.
if you're thinking about Fortnite and Apex Legends as an esport,
Right.
could you talk about what you think are how would you compare those two, and what would you say would make one a better game for esports versus another?
Yeah. And Fortnite and Apex are quite a bit different than Siege. Obviously, they're not really first-person tactical shooters.
Yep, yep.
But I would say Fortnite definitely appeals to a younger crowd.
Yeah.
I mean, if you just look at the graphics and animation, it's definitely more cartoonish,
Yep.
and it seems a lot more children-friendly than
Yeah.
Apex is. And so certainly Fortnite has a huge pool, huge audience to draw from. Whereas Apex, I think, is for a more mature audience, looking to just get some really, really good gameplay out of a battle royale. So both are tremendous games. I think both have a lot of potential. I mean, any game that has a lot of interest, there's opportunity for making it into an esport, right? So, yeah.
Okay, and then just the last question for you is like, you know, in terms of esports or the future of esports,
Right.
what do you think is coming up in terms of like trends or changes to the industry?
Right. I mean, esports as a whole is already a multi-billion-dollar industry,
Yep.
and there's tons of companies that are interested in sponsoring teams and all that sort. If you look at the scene as a whole, it's just been getting bigger and bigger, and it doesn't seem like it's stopping anytime soon. Tournament prizes are becoming bigger and bigger. Dota 2, for example, last year their prize pool was $20 million,
Yeah.
which is humongous.
Yeah.
Colleges are starting to pick up teams for esports in particular, for League of Legends, for Dota, for everything really, and they're starting to offer scholarships for them to come over, and so I think that's going to happen more and more.
Right.
Even high schools are beginning to develop their own esports program to help people become professionals. So I think esports is going to be around for a really, really long time, and I think just like any other sport, it's just going to become bigger and bigger as well.
Great. All right, well, everybody, we are here with Aaron Gotcha Chung. Thank you very much for your time.
Sure. Absolutely.